After months of politicking and horse trading, the adopted candidates of the governing All Progressives Congress emerged leaders of the 9th National Assembly on Tuesday. The party successfully averted a repeat of what happened in 2015 when its adopted candidates lost the Senate presidency and speakership seats to Bukola Saraki and Yakubu Dogara. The party's candidates also clinched the deputy Senate president and the speakership seat. Good afternoon and welcome to Standpoint. I'm Ibrahim Shita. I'll be discussing the leadership of the 9th Assembly and the task ahead with the public affairs analyst, Devo Okore. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Senator Ahmed Lawan and Ovi Omwagege are the leaders of the 9th Assembly, 9th Senate Assembly, while Femi Wajabiamila and Ahmed Wase will lead the Green Chamber. So what do you make of these personalities of the personalities of those emerging in the Senate and also the House of Representatives, and also their kind of what they will be rendering in this 9th Assembly?
Well, we'd like to say that they have been chosen by the collective will of the National Assembly members, both in the Senate and in the House of Reps. And as people noticed, there was some very tedious negotiations and a lot of higgy-haga among the assemblymen just until the election came and finally a vote was announced, which is democratic in its process. As to what influenced them is another question. But what I would be looking forward to is that this collective will was made with the hope that they would deliver on the mandate upon the legislature and not about the personalities. For some time now, we have been making our options and our selections based on personalities. Right. And if we continue in that line, that may not augur too well for the collective interest of Nigerians.
Well, despite the glaring frosty relationship between the president, the Buhari-led administration, and also the Senator Bukola Saraki led the 8th Assembly, and looking at the House of Representatives as well, they still made some gains during those times. At least they passed at least 300 bills, even though there are some of the bills that were not passed. But what really will now be your own expectations? Even though Senator Ahmed Lawan said recently that the 8th Assembly didn't do so well, that he's going to ensure that 9th Assembly surpasses the gains of the 8th Assembly. Are you also anticipating the same thing?
I hope that response from him, that's Ahmed Lawan, was more objective than political, because if you know from the political end, it's always about the opposition play. However, he's not in a position to make a judgment. We, the people, are, and that's the whole idea behind the legislature. In terms of my expectation of whether they will outperform the 8th Assembly, much is yet to be seen. However, going by the first incidents that took place, it leaves a lot of questions, whereby an opposition senator raised an order to debate the president's speech, and he was hollered down, and eventually the speaker or the Senate president knocked it down and declined on it. And I thought that was a golden opportunity that was missed for the new 9th Assembly to show its capacity to be able to not only first represent the people, then work with the executive. As to the old frosty relationship, like I mentioned, it was more political than it was objective. Right. There is a reason why the legislature exists, and I think as we begin to set the agenda, it will be right for the media and each and every one of us to get it right. Now, it's about governance and not about politicking. What we've seen is a lot of politicking and less of governance. Remember, their role is not to walk in tandem with the executive. No, their role is not to be in the pockets of the executive or to rubber stamp or endorse. No, that is not their role. Their role is to enable the mandate of the executive in the interest of you and me. That's the collective citizenry. We have to get that right. If we don't understand that, then we begin to miss the point on many of the discussions that we have or the interpretation of the actions that are taking place.
Now, you're thinking that they missed the opportunity of them having to debate the president's speech, that they were actually supposed to do it. Now, what would now be, well, looking at the role of opposition? Because now that we have an APC majority in the National Assembly, and then they can always swallow the
Yes.
the voices of the opposition just in one viva voce, voice vote.
Right.
So what would the role of the opposition now look like in this ninth assembly?
Well, first of all, the Speaker, sorry, not the Speaker, the Senate President and the Speaker, both leaders in their own houses, in as much as they have a majority position, remember, they represent the 360 constituencies.
Right.
Therefore, their moves should be balanced at every point in time. I would like to see, like I said, less of polarization. Let it be that if they're taking a stand, they're taking that stand because it was in the collective interest of Nigerians, which I believe as they go through their various debates, they would find that balance. Secondly, also remember that in the election of both the Senate President and the Speaker, it wasn't just about APC. There was a negotiation, there was a balance of powers in terms of extending their hands out to the opposition to also get their collective input and buy-in to ensure that they had the final win that they got. Now, the role of the opposition in terms of the minority whip and the minority deputy whip is to play a balancing role, to play an objective standard within the House to ensure that at every point in time when motions are led or positions need to be taken, they would always act as that not just moral compass, but also objective compass to ensure that the House is always on the right track. Remember, everything they do is under the watch eye of the people. So I expect to see constructive, not opposition, but constructive presence by the opposition, even though they have a minority position.
Well, even though we said a little earlier that the 8th Assembly passed the bill numbering 300, but then, unfortunately, the 8th Assembly also had some of the bills, being rejected, about 40 of them. So we now saw some abandonment of about 100 bills that are still yet to be passed. So many of them. So we will say there will be so much work for these 9th Assembly to do in the next 4 years.
Well, given the socioeconomic position of Nigeria, there has been homework piled up for the National Assembly.
Especially the issue of security,
yes.
one of its kind.
And if I may just use the opportunity to break down some of the issues. First of all, like I mentioned, the National Assembly is meant to enable the executive. So this next level that we have been talking about is not in the hands of the executive. It's actually in the hands of the legislator to give the executive the policy playing ground that they require to be able to deliver on it. Now, that is first point key, which is why the relationship must work to ensure that they can get this across. Already within the past, we've seen the frosty relationship in terms of the budget implementation. That's the Appropriation Act, and where it goes awry, especially regarding appropriation and allocation. That's one first point of call. Secondly, I'd like to mention the issue of restructuring, and practically all the work that they have to do lies a lot within this aspect. We've spoken of restructuring in various aspects, but the truth is
even at the period leading to 2015, and also it's dominated a public way in 2019. Yeah, there are still so many things you would like to say, but then you mentioned the issue of budget. One of the things that this current administration, the President Buhari-led administration, is saying that it wants January to December kind of a budget
time.
So now that we have the top 4 position being occupied by the ruling party, so should we now see that that's going to happen?
Well, ideally it should, but within the past, it still was within the APC. So remember,
because the Senate
member.
The newly elected Senate President said that within 3 months, budget passing will be made a reality.
Yes, it's easier to speak than to implement. One, we have to give it to the executive, and that was where what's his name, Senator Ita Inyang also spoke a lot on. They actually submitted their budget to the National Assembly on time. But because of maybe for what we refer to the political intricacies, it wasn't passed on time. Now, by the time the Assembly reviewed it, not to talk of all their breaks in and out and all the national issues that delayed, by the time they submitted it back, the presidency declined on it the first time, saying that some aspects were overlooked and there were issues. By the time he pushed it back again, I remember time had passed, and that was almost near an election. They didn't get their votes in time. So it's easier said than done. It's going to take affirmative action from the House together to be able to achieve that January to December timeline.
Absolutely. There's so much to talk about in the course of the program. But right now, at this juncture, we'll take a breather and be back. Stay with us. Thank you so much for staying with us, and you're still watching Standpoint. And we're looking at the issue, the Ninth Assembly and the challenges ahead for them. I've been speaking with Devo Okore. He's a public affairs analyst, and also joining us on the program as a public affairs analyst, Great Imo. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the program.
My pleasure to be here.
All right, before I bring you straight into the conversation, you were saying something before the break that issue of restructuring also dominated. You know, the people talked about it before 2019. So do you think that this Ninth Assembly will not consider it? Because they're saying if this country is restructured, insecurity, corruption, banditry, kidnapping, and so on and so forth, an issue of economy will be tackled, will be brought to a standstill, and then we'll have a great nation. Are you also convinced that, I mean, would you be convinced that because we have an APC majority Ninth Assembly, this will be done?
Well, you see, like I mentioned, restructuring is what it means to whoever is defining it, where it regards to governance, where it regards to power, where it regards to security, infrastructure, allocation. Yes. So now the executive have no powers outside that which the Assembly has given them. Therefore, there's a job to be done in terms of reviewing some aspects of our Constitution, where it refers to, especially number one, the exclusive, the concurrent, and the residual list. That's the power sharing formula, and that's where the issues of federalism come up. Secondly, you're referring to the issues of mandate authorization, which was actually the biggest bone of contention between the last assembly, whereby they went back and forth as to who owned the mandate of the budget, in whose power lied the implementation of the constituency budgets. Now, these are matters that need to be reviewed and brought to a conclusive end so that we can move forward. Like, for example, when we talk of the exclusive list, there's so many powers that rest within the federal government, which hinder the states from implementing because of their limited capacity to implement them. Secondly, many of the aspects of the exclusive list, like social infrastructure, where you talk of education, health, power, and even state security, lie within the federal government, exclusive rights of the federal government. Therefore, as you can see, in terms of security matters linger because states really do not have those powers. So they need to address this and bring about that constitutional change so that we can get to that point where we begin to see these dividends.
And that is another thing. Great Imo, constitutional change, as he has rightly suggested. They say that this constitution we are having is handed over to us by the military. So we just need to maybe jettison it or amend it to a very great extent, or even do away with it and have our own new constitution. Now, this National Assembly, Ninth Assembly, they've promised so many things. Would you also see them maybe having something to do with this particular constitution to make it work for Nigerians?
Well, I honestly have advocated for some kind of restructuring. It doesn't matter the view anybody have about it. Everything that makes progress, you must continuously retool. Whether it's a business, even as a man who was once a child, when you grow to become a family man, you will require to have certain kind of environment to accommodate your new stature. And this is how nations grow as well. You must continuously retool the framework with which nations are governed in order to achieve, your aim. There is overall purpose. There is a dream. We must have a national vision, a national focus. But whatever that focus might be, at every point in our nation's development, you require to fine-tune your instrument towards achieving national purpose. So And also when you compare what Nigeria is today and a lot of the challenges we are faced with, people have made comparisons between the Constitution of 1963 and now the Constitution that we are bequeathed with by the military government or the former military rulers. So when they do this comparison, they discover that sincerely, historically, Nigeria did better when we were a true federation.
Regionalism.
Exactly. So sometimes the arguments we hear against fundamental restructuring are just based on fears that are literally unfounded. So as much as we want to be together as it is, we need to fine-tune our unity. And you can't say.
No. Let us.
For example, let me give you an example. Right now, the kind of security challenge we have in Nigeria will definitely require that you have, to an extent, community police. If you don't want to give it holistically to the governors to manage because of fear they may mismanage it, it still does not remove from the fact that you require people who know the terrain to be able to secure the environment very well. When you bring one Okechukwu to Boronu, to somewhere in Sambisa, he doesn't know his way around. I mean, there's little he can do. As much as he's equipped to do the job,
okay,
but
in a nutshell,
sorry. In that case, he would require somebody who is home-based, to an extent, to guide him. And this is part of what we mean by community police. It's not that when you talk about community police, you're going to leave it wholeheartedly to the whims and caprices of governors. They have to partner with police. They have to be trained by police. But what happens is that they are more home-based, and the payment and the sustenance of such.
Let me get before I go to him. Let me get the crux of your argument. Is it that you're saying that this constitution is truly bad for Nigerians? Like as everyone has said, or so many people have said.
I've not said that the constitution is bad for Nigeria, but I'm saying there are so much you can reject about this constitution.
So you're
for
also
example,
saying,
yes, a lot of powers are vested in the nation, in the center, that makes it a bit difficult for the constituent units of Nigeria to really function. Issues of even what they call revenue generation. Part of why we can't raise much capital is that everybody is dependent on oil. If you check between 1960 and before we went to war and after the war, why Nigeria made so much progress? You know, the regions we are producing, and they were paying tax. So people have to look inwards. But the situation where everybody have to wait at the end of the month to go to Abuja to get stipends is making Nigeria unproductive. So, for example, that is one of the things we need to deal with.
All right, great, Imo. Yes. Let me quickly also ask you too, because our conversation centers around what tasks lie ahead for the 9th Assembly. Now, for instance, the lawmakers adjourned for 19 days, and that brings to the fore again how they go on break intermittently. And so many people have been saying, no, listen, we need to have part-time legislatures because they are raking in profits. Now they said 19.89 billion naira is a welcome allowance for all of the lawmakers. Does it worry you?
In fact, if we must set agenda for the National Assembly, one of the things we must demand from them, we must demand sacrifice, we must demand sense of responsibility from this caliber of leaders. For example, from what our own Sheikh Sani revealed to the nation some time ago, you discover that these people go home at least with 15 million each every month. When you calculate their whatever they get, when you divide it you know, on a ratio of per month, they go home with 15 million each one of them. And this is a country where some states cannot pay 20,000 minimum wage. I mean, this is a country where over 50% of the youth population, they are unemployed. This is a country where major infrastructures are not developed. Leadership is about responsibility. Those who govern a nation must not see leadership as an opportunity to enrich themselves. They must see it as a call to responsibility, as a call to service. How can you justify for whatever, I can't in fact on whatever they will be spending in that National Assembly that makes a group of less than 500 people spend over 120 billion every year. That is mind-boggling. We cannot sustain that. And that is why, if we must give them agenda, we must give them agenda of profligacy, we must give them agenda to be responsible towards the welfare and the well-being of Nigerians.
All right. Devo Okore.
Okay.
Great Imo is also concerned that, listen, these lawmakers must be responsible to Nigerians in terms of how much they collect as allowance. But what they are getting, it is argued that it is backed by law. RMFAC also say they are entitled to their allowances. If also the executive and the judiciary, they are all entitled to their allowances.
Right.
But how do we begin to now cut these things down? Because he's saying that most states may not be able to pay this minimum wage that has just been signed into law.
Well, you see, democracy is about a government by its people. And people forget that it's not just about the leaders, it's about you and me. We hold the measurement points. We hold the points of governance, which we have left fallow for a long time. Nigerians need to realize that you play a role in holding your governors and your leaders, your House of Reps, your presidency, all forms or organs of government, holding them account. Now, where does that happen? Currently, the RMFAC actually put in a petition or a bill to actually reduce the pay of the legislator, but it was declined by the presidency. Many people are not aware about that. And the truth is, where should the heat be? So it wasn't about the legislators. What they earn is backed by law. Now, if they did their jobs, I'm not sure we would have issues. If they did their jobs given their commensurate pay, which is not commensurate with the economic situation in this country, we would not be complaining. So the issue is not so much of the pay. What we're looking at is the outcome, the impact of why they are there, what they're doing there, and how it trickles down to each and every one of us. Like I mentioned, they have an agenda. They have a role. They need to enable the mandates that the APC-led government has vested on Nigerians based on winning the election. That is the point.
Okay, well, that is it. We said a little earlier before you came in, it said now that we have all of them, so we shouldn't anticipate any kind of fight between the executive and also the legislative arms of government, that there should be this synergy as they've also promised. So we are not going to be seeing any drama this time around.
Well, we shouldn't be expecting drama, but at the same time also, we shouldn't have a rubber stamp legislature, because the danger is this. As much as we all love President Buhari, we want him to succeed, but we must also be careful to understand that this is a democracy. The fundamental role of the legislature is what to maintain the ideals of democracy. It must be sustained, irrespective of how much, because it might be President Buhari today, and if perchance it's not President Buhari tomorrow, whatever we do now will be a precedent. And when you set such precedents and it is not in tandem and consistent with the ethos of democracy, you get to a point after a long while, somebody comes in and says, after all, you did it. So I don't expect them to have a fight, but I expect a legislator that will play by the rules of the Constitution, that will also remind Mr. President where necessary, that he needs to do what he has to do. And also, I don't want most of the times.
We need to close up now.
Okay,
we need to go home. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you for coming on the program. Our public affairs analyst, Devo Okore, and also great Imo Jonathan. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on the program.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, how all the promises made by Senator Ahmed Lawan and Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila will translate to a better country is still in the realm of the imagination. However, the next 4 years will show whether those words were meant or not. Meanwhile, Nigerians are waiting and watching. And that's how we wrap it up on today's edition of Standpoint. I'm Ibrahim Shita. Bye now.